Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 40. And today we are going to talk about the burn it to the ground boss.
Life begins at 40. That's what they say.
Which is interesting because we're well into 60, but that's another topic for another time. So what do you do if you have a boss who slams his or her fist down on the self-destruct button so emphatically that it risks burning the entire company to the ground? What do you do in that circumstance?
Yeah, somebody said something pretty compelling to me the other day at jiu-jitsu, and I was complaining about a situation where I had a boss who was a big desk smasher, the now convicted Carlos Watson, and he kind of quietly just said, I could barely hear it. It was in the periphery of my hearing. He goes, so you could have found a new job, right? And I kind of stopped and I go, what do you, he goes, California's at-will state. Why don't you leave? And I go, there are a lot of compelling reasons why I didn't leave, but the biggest one being I didn't have another job. And he was like, oh, okay, so it's like a you problem. And I was completely unsympathetic. If you're in a bad situation, you want to improve your situation, you leave. If you care about your mental health, you'll leave. But somehow it's not that easy always, right? So.
Well, and spoiler alert, that's what we're going to talk about today. If you are working for one of these people, you're going to probably want to go as soon as you can. And again, obviously there's practical considerations for that, but let's give you some examples, right? So what do we mean when we talk about, this isn't just a bad boss. This is a burn to the ground and salt the earth afterwards boss, right? Yeah. And the example, the reason that we thought about talking about this today is I think the ultimate bad boss is Elon Musk.
Agreed. Even though one of the first 20 employees at Tesla who had the occasion to work with him, it's a guy who I know, and he said initially he hated him, but came to really appreciate him. And I've tried to get him years later now. And we're talking in the last 12 months. I tried to get him to put some distance between his original opinion, and he refuses to budge. And so what about the racism that's going with the sexism? He's like, I don't know anything about that. I know the guy works hard and he's smart. That's the guy also is sitting on a ton of Tesla stock. So he could be very conscious of the fact that he's talking to a member of the media and does not want to affect his stock price. I don't know, but he's not been able to put any distance between him and Musk. So.
Well, and I think what's interesting is there's a couple of things that Musk has done. And it's, most of I come from an advertising background that have to do with advertising revenue. Right? So Musk bought Twitter, which I will continue to dead name just in spite of him. I am not saying X. Musk bought Twitter, and social media platforms run on advertising revenue. Right? Mm-hmm. And if they don't have advertising revenue, they aren't able to stay in business, no matter how cool they are or how trendy or how whatever. They have to have advertising revenue. So he came in and he made some choices that were of concern to advertisers. And these are people like the CMO of Procter & Gamble. These are huge companies, Fortune 100, and they are judicious about exposure for their brands, right? They're aware that there's some mom in the Midwest who's deciding which brand of toothpaste, and they want to make sure that their toothpaste isn't associated with anything that could be problematic. So Musk, not knowing this, made some mistakes. And to rectify that, he hired a woman called Linda Yaccarino, right? Who is, she's my age, which of course I automatically like her. She comes from a sales background, fantastic resume. And I was hoping that she would be the kind of person who could get him to understand reality.
No.
That's not what happened. So in the fall of last year, there was a clearly anti-Semitic tweet that Musk supported. He said, basically agreed with it. A lot of advertisers got skittish and left. And instead of trying to placate them, instead of doing what other major media folks do, he went on the attack. And I'm going to read a paragraph from an article in Wired magazine that describes this.
Yep.
Musk was talking at the New York Times Deal Book Summit last fall. said that advertisers with concerns about his conduct should stop spending on the platform, which has historically been dependent on ad revenue. Don't advertise, Musk said in response to the question about X's recent problems. This is on a stage talking to advertisers. If someone is going to try and blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. Is that clear? Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience, that's how I feel. Don't advertise. And he was, of course, referring to Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, which was one of the brands that had paused their advertising. So that's slamming his hand on the self-destruct button, number one. Number two, there is again, stop me if I'm getting too wonky, but the World Advertising Federation or World Federation of Advertisers started an organization, a voluntary organization called GARM, which was the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. And the members were advertising clients, advertising agencies, social media platforms. And they banded together voluntarily to say, hey, what is hate speech? What is offensive content? And how do we allow advertisers and agencies to be cognizant of where they're advertising, right? This is an old idea. This predates social media. In the dawn of time when I was working in advertising, we all knew, like I live in Seattle, Boeing used to be a big advertiser in Seattle. We all knew that if there was a plane crash, you had to go and pull the Boeing ads. Boeing didn't want to advertise next to a plane crash, right? And so this is not a new idea. It's not aimed at Musk. It's not about social media.
Also, what's not a new idea is industries policing themselves before the government steps in to police themselves. Hence, we have the MPAA with movies. The Electric Power Research Institute was supposed to step in there to prevent the deregulation of the utilities, and that failed. They deregulated anyway. So industries have done this a lot. Every athletic commission for sports like MMA that were initially talked about as being human cockfighting, they did the same thing. We'll police ourselves before you do because we're going to do a better job of it because we know the industry. So nothing about it is strange. So
there's also another sort of more fundamental element of choice and free market, right? Mm-hmm. Advertisers can choose to put their money wherever they want, right? Which most big networks know, right? They do something called an upfront, which has, again, very long time tradition, where they invite all the decision makers for this billions of media dollars to New York or some other fancy place. They wine and dine them. They bring out stars. They entertain them. And they do this big, show to say, this is why ABC should get your money, or, whoever it is. So there's a long tradition of saying, we know you have options. Please come and spend your money with our network or our program, right? So just him telling them to, quote unquote, go fuck themselves flies in the face of that. The other thing that's underpinning this is I get to decide where I want to spend my money. If I walk into a restaurant and it is filled with vermin, I am going to turn around and walk out, and I am not going to spend my money with them because I don't want to eat in a place that's filled with vermin. Yeah. It is a perfectly reasonable assumption for advertisers to walk into the house that Musk rebuilt and say, this is full of vermin.
Okay. And now you have to cut to the chase because the suspense is killing me.
Okay, sorry. I'm rambling. So he sued GARM. He sued them and said that they were doing an illegal boycott.
Yeah.
I mean, what's a legal boycott? Illegal boycott. And the next day, GARM shut down.
Yep. Which is smart. It's like, we're not going to spend a nickel fighting with you, and we're still not going to advertise with you. We're not going to spend a nickel fighting you, and we're not advertising with you. And now the most important thing is they've dug in, right? The go fuck yourself wasn't enough. Now at this point, being the richest man in the world, they've dug in, and you're going to need way more than all the money you have to get them to advertise again. They're not. This was a fail on a colossal scale.
Well, but I think what's interesting, I mean, honestly, when I first read it before GARM came back and said, hey, we're too small to fight this, we're out. The first thing I thought, because one of the lines that he posted was, this is war. And my first thought was, you know what? If you go outside and shoot yourself in the foot in your carport, that is not a war.
That's good. Yeah.
Right? Which is essentially what I perceived him doing. But what's interesting is how many messages he is tapping into. Right. So what they talked about this, Yacarino talked about it as an illegal boycott. Right. They've talked about it as a free speech issue. Now, no one is saying that people can't say whatever they want to on Twitter, including Musk. They're just saying, I'm not going to choose to dine in that particular restaurant. Right. But Yacarino came out, and makes me very sad that she has gone to the dark side so thoroughly. No small group should be able to monopolize what gets monetized. This is an important acknowledgement and a necessary step in the right direction. So, okay, I'm just going to repeat that. No small group should be able to monopolize what gets monetized. Elon Musk monopolizing.
Yeah, is one person a group? I don't think one person is a group, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's monopolizing not just this public square that used to be Twitter. Doesn't he have a bunch of satellites? And isn't he making deals with foreign powers about who gets access to the satellites? And anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
I've seen. I put out a record once called "Fear, Power, God," and it's a spoken word compilation. And it's Allen Ginsberg, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, but one of the people on it was Jello Biafra, and he was talking about the Space Shuttle Challenger, the one that blew up. And in it, he says, it was supposed to be filled with plutonium. They were shooting nuclear waste into outer space. If it had been blown, that one had been a lot of people would have gotten sick and died because plutonium would have sprayed all over Cape Canaveral. And then he has a line that he repeats twice, and he says, "How reckless can you get? How reckless can you get?" And I've seen. I don't know if anybody within earshot here remembers Brobeck, Flager, and Harrison. It was one of the biggest law firms, not only in California, up there with Wilson Sonsini, but nationally. I had a friend from high school who worked in the East Coast office, and they reckless behavior at the top. One day the company existed, and the next day it was gone. I mean, gone. If it had been a publicly traded company, there would have been lawsuits all over the place where people saying like, what did you just do? And I had a friend who was a CEO of a company who then later ended up, he not only destroyed the company, but destroyed his own life in total. But he said to me in a moment of great candor, he goes, "Eugene, have you ever walked by that big red button and wondered what would happen if you pushed it?" And he pushed it in his life. He pushed it. So it was devastating for his kids, for his wife, ex-wife, and then his current wife, who then became an ex-wife, his other associates, his business associates. And sometimes I had a friend who used to say about people like this, they're self-correcting problems. And I rich or not, I believe Musk to be a self-correcting problem. You've seen what's happened to the prices to the stock share for Tesla, as well as purchase for Tesla. That's cake cratering. It's a wasteland over at Twitter, and I also won't refuse to call it X. So what else does he have? He's openly feuding with his trans daughter, and she's winning. And he's lost the backing of his celebrity enablers, a la Dave Chappelle and so on. I don't understand. I mean, look, Rupert Murdoch, another foreign national who's creating havoc in America, has done so effectively, quietly, and with the business in mind. Musk smoking pot on Joe Rogan has not. It's the only reason people are listening is because he's got the money and wondering when he's going to not have the money anymore. But I think he's largely a self-correcting problem. And if you work at those companies, I really wonder why.
Well,
I mean, my friend of mine who was like one of the first 20 people at Tesla left. Why? For the same reason that you leave any party, or the same reason the guy was suggesting I leave Ozzy. It was just uncomfortable for him to be there. But Musk, I don't know what the end game is for him. And I think that's the most dangerous thing of all. He doesn't have one.
Well, so let's talk about many people who are listening to this podcast do not work for Elon Musk. but
Right.
something about this rings true. So how do you know if you are potentially in a situation where you're working for someone who could burn your company to the ground, and with it potentially your livelihood and financial security? So the first thing is they do not listen to other people.
Yeah.
I think that's the defining characteristic. They're usually men, although there are women who have done this too. And they seem to be very narcissistic. And I'm talking about this not as a psychological, designation, but just from like kind of, they only think about themselves, very sort of skewed worldview, and they're very volatile. Right? So there's a real ego of I'm the best, I'm the greatest, rules don't apply to me, that sort of idea. But they're also really kind of emotionally fragile. Like they get very excited or upset if people don't agree with them. Point number two, they are very litigious.
Yeah.
It's not just I disagree with you, I'm going to, say some nasty things about you. It's I am going to get this whole legal mechanism and political mechanism to root you out. Like not only can they not stand anyone disagreeing with them, they're going to spend some money to squash anyone who disagrees with them and anyone who can tell them something else. So if you are working for someone who takes umbrage easily, does not listen to other people, is convinced that he is the only one who is the authority and that the rules don't apply to him, you may be working for a burn it to the ground boss.
Yeah, I also had somebody who said something that I thought was pretty sage. He said, "I will never work for a boss who doesn't have a boss again." And I thought that's pretty solidly put.
Right.
And it's worked in his great stead. I was not so fortunate. So,
Well, one of the things that I'll say frequently to my executive coaching clients is that a leader should be able to accept influence. Right? Once in a while, do what the people around you say, even if you don't 100% agree with them.
Yep.
Just be in
Instinctively,
practice.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said just to keep in practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that once. I've mentioned it before on the show when I was at Code Magazine and I let somebody edit my Chris Rock cover story. And he made one word change in the lead, and it still drives me crazy. But it was really important. He and I are still friends today, and he works for Warner Brothers, and it's a good. It was a good thing that I did.
Well, and I think the other example, of course, of this type of boss is Donald Trump. We don't generally talk a lot about politics, but this was just such a perfect example because I was speaking with a friend who said, it's been however many days since Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee. What is the Trump campaign doing? And I am guessing, and I do not have any more knowledge than anyone else on this, but my guess is that Trump also doesn't listen to other people. And I think Trump also doesn't have the imaginative wherewithal. He doesn't have the capacity to imagine another framework. So I don't think it ever occurred to Trump that a man who was the president of the United States would voluntarily relinquish the opportunity to do that again, especially in favor of Kamala Harris. I think he couldn't, and because I have to believe that there were people on his staff who read the New York Times like I do, who said, we're going to need a contingency plan that's more than you coming up with another nickname or suggesting that she just decided she was Black.
So bad.
But I think that this is the thing. And this is the burn to the ground challenge, right? Is if Trump had listened to the person who inevitably, I believe that person exists, said, we need a contingency plan. We need to be ready for this eventuality. And Trump dismissed it out of hand. So he has been flailing for weeks, right?
Yeah.
And, and it's interesting, if you'll allow me another digression. Right before we recorded, I went to the dentist and I had a filling redone, and the dentist numbed one tooth. And as she was working in my mouth, I was like, what is she doing on this tooth way over here in the back? Wait, now she's over on the other side of my mouth. And I stopped her and I was like, what tooth are you working on? She's like, it's the one in the front. I'm only working on the one. And what I realized is that our proprioception means our awareness of our body in space.
Mhm.
And because the front of my mouth was numb, my proprioception was interrupted.
Mhm.
So I couldn't accurately assess where the drill was going in my mouth, which caused a certain amount of alarm.
It's
This is
funny. I went to a dentist as well and had a very similar situation. Today, same thing, worked on the tooth, and then as we're driving away, I have a itch on my chin, and I scratch it, and I can't feel me scratching it, but I still feel the itch.
right.
The
But
work is very strange.
the analogy that I was thinking about, because I knew I was going to drive back and we were going to record, is that proprioception is based on accurate information. And
Mhm.
because of the Novocaine, I did not have accurate information about what was happening in my face, which
Yeah.
meant that I had this whole other narrative about like she's drilling in the back molar on the other side. This is
Mhm.
actually happens in business. If a
Mhm.
leader cuts him or herself off from actual information, if she becomes numbed or deadened to accuracy, different points of view, different contingencies, his proprioception, his awareness of how he as a leader or his organization is operating in the world is significantly impaired. And he's going to fall down flat on his face.
And I guarantee you, if there was one person who said we should have a contingency plan, that person has what should have happened now is that person should be elevated to a position of greater significance because they saw it coming and nobody else did. But I guarantee you that person has not met with that fate at all.
No,
Right?
and they
Like
probably
Hitler refused to listen to his generals way before everybody commonly understood that the war was lost by Germany. Right.
right.
So, yeah.
Right. And I think, back to your point, the spoiler alert about, what do you do if you work for this kind of
Yeah.
boss? Leave if you can. And again, we've talked about this before. We have, paychecks and health insurance and sick kids and things, but leave as soon as you can. This is really a run away because I think it's not just, are you going to be part of an organization that's going to burn to the ground?
Mhm.
There's also people who are sucked over to the dark side, right?
Mhm.
Like you stayed at Ozzy and you and I had those conversations too. Like, what are you doing? And you had reasons, right? You had reasons that made sense to you. And at the time they even made sense to me. You can stay in a bad organization that's being burnt to the ground and leave with your integrity, if not your retirement. There are people who go to the dark side. Linda Yaccarino, right?
Yeah.
JD Vance, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
Trump
but
loses, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, but the thing is about, and it would be dishonest for me to say anything else. I was very much thinking of Mae West during this 9.5 year baton death march of my time at Ozzy, and Mae West famously said, "Keep a diary because someday it'll keep you." I was super mindful of the fact that I was employee number one. I mentioned that many times. I was the first guy here, and people would say, as a point of pride, "I can't believe you've lasted this long." And I knew if I could write it to some kind of apt movie conclusion that I could like win this thing. And as it is, the book that's being bandied around now that my agent's trying to sell it has employee number one in the title. The reason why I signed the deal for the TV thing was because I could do so with the imprimatur of employee number one. So at a certain point, I realized that he had a greater amount of exposure than I did because you're screwing over writers. What do you think I'm doing sitting there every day paying attention to what's going on around me, knowing that nobody would believe it unless I wrote it. So it
But
and then
that's
I've yeah, yeah.
but
So
that's also that to me is a valid motive for you to
a
say
great
this is amazing material. I am
right,
gonna, there's a book,
right.
there's a movie deal, there's like it worked. That
Yeah,
makes
it did.
sense. What I'm suggesting is that there are people, JD Vance, right?
Yeah.
He knows that the last guy that was Trump's vice president, Trump, according to some, tried to end his life. So
Correct.
he knows why that job is open, and he took the job anyway. And, like my dad used to say, if you lie down with dogs, you're going to get up with fleas. Right. And if you are hanging out with people who are that ethically compromised, who are that narrow-minded or power hungry because you want the power or whatever it is that you're looking for, it's going to change you. Like Linda Yaccarino she is done in the industry. I do not believe that this woman will ever have any credibility. JD Vance, if Trump doesn't win, this is me looking up to the sky. If Trump doesn't win, JD Vance is going to be like a sexist footnote and a bunch of couch jokes. He's also done.
We call that foreshadowing in literary terms, because I'm working on the Substack. Has nothing to do with couches.
But I think that's the challenge, right? Is to recognize, because I worked for Carlos too. And it was a very short period of time because I didn't look at it as material. I looked at it as unacceptable behavior. And I chose not to stay because that was not a dog I wanted to lie down next to. And those are both valid decisions. But I think, be mindful of the fact that you don't want to necessarily be hanging around people, because it's like, it can sadly be like domestic violence situations, right? People get used to a certain amount of abuse and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. And so I think we talk about a lot of bad bosses. Some of them are inconvenient. This one, I think, is one of the more dangerous that we have actually discussed in 40 episodes.
All right. Yeah, Musk is a serious problem. And the thing is, ultimately, what he's going to get in terms of an employee base, he's going to get fanboys, and that doesn't work well ever. Right? You need some kind of really deathly honest kind of, not an echo chamber, but some sort of chamber where you have people who like you enough to not bullshit you.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure he doesn't have that and doesn't encourage it either.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's about all we have time for. So 2 pieces of housekeeping. One is we love to hear from you. I read every email that we get. It's WTF@badbossbrief.com. That's WTF@badbossbrief.com. Ask us questions, advice, give us suggestions about show topics, or tell us what you think about what it is that we're talking about. We are open to hearing that. And then the second thing is, Eugene, you've got some book tour coming up. You want to tell us where you're going to be?
I do. I have 4 shows coming up. I have one August 21st in Washington, D.C. at the Black Cat. I have one August 22nd in Brooklyn, New York, at TVI, I as in eyeball, and it's with Steve Blush, who, if some of you remember, is a guy who had done the book American Hardcore, as well as used to do No Exit Magazine, or was it Exit Magazine? Exit Magazine. Sorry, Steve. August 24th in Boston at O'Brien's, and August 25th at Askew's in Providence, Rhode Island. And these are book shows, so not music hours. There'll be a lot of them at 5:00. You can get tickets if you follow me on Substack. There is a link for tickets there, so you should come by. Come by and say hi. I'll have Cora with me, so you can keep it clean. I got a kids with me, so it'll be fun.
Which will be so fun. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Eugene, for joining from. Where are you now? I am in
Dijnów. Say it again. Dijnów, Poland, on the Baltic Sea. It's great.
Yes, great. And thank you to your prompter, and hello.
Yes.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple weeks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie, and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.